Before we dive into this story, smash the subscribe button and hit like because tonight's story takes you inside a place for the most dangerous criminals. The siren shattered the silence of the desert night. Red lights flashed across concrete walls as alarms screamed through the corridors. Steel doors slammed shut automatically, locking down entire wings of the facility in seconds. Personnel reported immediately as chaos began. Officer Daniel Reeves turned the corner into cell block C, gripping his flashlight tightly. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a trail of blood. This prison was built to hold the worst criminals in the country, men so violent that other prisons refused to house them. Reeves stepped closer to the metal bars of cell 32. That's when he saw the body. A correctional officer lay motionless against the wall. His belt was gone, so were the keys. Reeves grabbed his radio. "We have an officer down. Possible escape attempt if an inmate had managed to get hold of those keys." This prison had a problem. The men in cell block C weren't ordinary. The first was Victor Salazar, to the outside world, a businessman. But he secretly ran one of the largest criminal networks in the state. Drug trafficking, money laundering, contract killings. Even inside prison, rumors said Salazar still controlled his organization through coded messages. Then there was Marcus Ironhand Tate, a towering man convicted for violent crimes. He was unpredictable and dangerously aggressive. But the most mysterious inmate was Daniel Mercer. Mercer didn't look like the others. He was quiet, pale, almost ordinary. Evidence connected Mercer to several disappearances. He never confessed. But even the most violent prisoners seemed to respect him. Months before the alarm, intelligence officers noticed unusual activity. Whispering during recreation. Notes passed between cells. Strange symbols were scratched into tables. One officer saw Salazar slip a folded piece of paper under Mercer's cell door. Back in the corridor on the night of the alarm, Officer Reeves and a team of guards began checking each cell. Salazar stood calmly. Tate watched silently. Both were where they were supposed to be. But when they reached Mercer's cell, they stopped. The door was locked. The lights were on. The bed wasn't touched. But Mercer was gone. It was as if he had simply vanished. Then Reeves noticed something scratched into the wall. 3 words carved deep into the stone. He stepped closer, his stomach tightening. Those words made it clear that Mercer's disappearance wasn't random. It was planned. The message read, Phase 1 complete. The prison remained locked down long after the alarm stopped. Steel doors stayed sealed. Armed officers stood guard at every corridor. Floodlights lit the yard like daylight, even though the desert night stretched far beyond. Inside the command room, tension hung thick. The warden stood over a table filled with blueprints of the prison. Investigators and state police surrounded him, staring at the same question that none of them could answer. How does someone disappear from a maximum security cell without opening the door? Daniel Mercer's cell had been examined 3 separate times. Every bar, every bolt, every inch of concrete. The door lock was intact. The window was sealed. The ventilation duct was too small for a human body. There was simply no obvious way Mercer could have escaped. And yet he was gone. Officer Daniel Reeves couldn't stop thinking about the words carved into the wall. Phase 1 complete. The phrase suggested planning, coordination, maybe even help. And that possibility made the situation far worse. Because if Mercer had help, it meant someone inside the prison might have been working with him. The investigation started immediately. Security footage from the entire cell block was pulled and reviewed frame by frame. For hours, investigators watched Mercer's cell door on the monitors. Nothing unusual. No guards opening the door. Then one technician leaned closer to the screen. Wait. Rewind that. The footage rolled back several minutes before the alarm. The hallway was quiet. A single guard walked past Mercer's cell. Then something strange happened. For exactly 11 seconds, the camera feed froze. When it resumed, the hallway looked exactly the same. But when the next guard passed by minutes later, Mercer was gone. The room went silent. 11 seconds. That was all it took. Someone had tampered with the camera system. And whoever did it knew exactly where the blind spot would appear. Warden Collins rubbed his face slowly. That wasn't Mercer, he said quietly. Someone helped him. Officers searched the prison again from top to bottom. The yard, the kitchens, maintenance tunnels, even the roof. But there was no sign of Mercer. Which meant something far more terrifying. He had already made it outside. State police set up roadblocks across nearby highways. Patrol units searched the desert roads surrounding the prison. Helicopters scanned miles of empty terrain. But Mercer had vanished without a vehicle. The desert should have trapped him. Back inside, investigators turned to the two inmates closest to Mercer, Victor Salazar and Marcus Ironhand Tate. Salazar sat calmly in the metal chair, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. Detective Jennings placed a photograph in front of him. "You know what this is about," she said. Salazar studied the photo, then he smiled faintly. "Looks like someone left. The cameras were tampered with, and the last inmate seen communicating with him was you." Salazar's eyes flickered with amusement. "Did you help him?" Jennings asked. Salazar tilted his head. "No." Salazar's smile widened. "You think Mercer needed help?" The question caught Jennings off guard. "You've been watching the wrong man," Salazar whispered. "You should be asking why someone wanted him outside." The interview ended. But Salazar's words left investigators uneasy. Someone out there had been waiting for him. Marcus Ironhand Tate sat across from two detectives, his massive frame barely fitting in the chair. Unlike Salazar, Tate looked furious. "You think I helped that freak?" Tate growled. "He wasn't like us. I've met real killers." "But Mercer scared them." Tate leaned forward. Mercer kept saying the same thing. "He said he wasn't planning an escape. Then what was he planning?" Tate swallowed. "He said the prison was the safest place. Until the day he left." Back in the command room, an analyst froze. "Detective, you need to see this." A body had been discovered that morning in a town nearly 200 miles away. The details were chillingly familiar. The victim matched the exact pattern Mercer had used in his past crimes. Detective Jennings felt her pulse spike. Mercer had only been missing for 12 hours. Yet somehow, someone had already been killed. Which meant one horrifying possibility. Mercer might not be working alone, and whoever helped him escape might have been waiting years to start something far worse. Because as investigators looked closer at the photos, they noticed something carved into the wall near the victim. The same 3 words, Phase 1 complete. The crime scene sat in complete silence. Flashing police lights reflected off the small wooden house at the edge of town, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. Investigators moved carefully through the rooms, documenting every detail, every fingerprint, every piece of evidence that might explain what had just happened. Detective Laura Jennings stood in the hallway staring at the words carved into the wall. Phase to Bagans, her stomach tightened. Daniel Mercer had been missing from prison for less than a day. Yet somehow, the exact type of crime linked to his old case had already appeared again. That didn't make sense. Even if Mercer had escaped and somehow traveled hundreds of miles, the timeline didn't add up. There simply wasn't enough time for him to reach this town and commit the crime himself. Which meant something else was happening. Someone else had done this, but they were following Mercer's pattern perfectly. Back at the prison, investigators reopened Mercer's entire criminal case history. Boxes of files were brought out of storage. Old photographs, evidence logs, witness statements, pieces of a puzzle that had never been fully solved. Years before Mercer was arrested, several people had disappeared across different counties. At the time, detectives assumed it was coincidence. But when Mercer was arrested, evidence suggested those disappearances were somehow tied to him. Still, Mercer had never confessed, and he never explained anything. That was enough to lock him away for life. But now, something inside those old files caught Jennings' attention. She noticed a strange pattern in the investigation timeline. Mercer had been interviewed several times, and each time, someone different had been present during the questioning. One had moved to another state, one had quietly retired, and one had disappeared entirely 6 months earlier. Jennings leaned back in her chair slowly. A thought formed in her mind. What if Mercer wasn't working alone? Inside a small closet, near the hallway, officers found something hidden behind a loose wall panel. A small envelope. Inside it was a single sheet of paper, and written across the page were dozens of names. At the very top of the list, one name had been circled. Detective Jennings stared at it in disbelief. Victor Salazar. Back at the prison, officers immediately rushed to cell block C. Salazar was still inside his locked cell, calm as ever. When Jennings arrived, she stood outside the bars and held up the photograph of the list. "Your name was found at the new crime scene." Salazar looked at it briefly, then he smiled. "I wondered when you'd find that. You've been communicating with Mercer." Salazar shook his head slowly. No. Then explain why your name was on that list. Salazar stepped closer to the bars. You still don't understand the game. Jennings' voice sharpened. Explain it. Salazar's eyes darkened. Mercer didn't escape to run. He escaped to activate them. The word echoed in the corridor. Jennings felt a chill run down her spine. Activate who? Salazar pointed toward the photograph. The people on that list. Teachers, drivers, clerks, neighbors. Jennings felt the realization settle in. What did he do to them? Salazar's smile returned. He studied them. Mercer spent years watching people, learning how they think. He turned them into followers. At that moment, Jennings' radio crackled. Laura, we have another situation. A second crime scene just appeared. Same signature. The voice sounded stunned. 3 more incidents. Across 3 different states, Jennings slowly turned back toward Salazar's cell. Salazar was watching her reaction carefully. You see it now, he said softly. Jennings whispered the question she feared. How many people are involved? Salazar shrugged. Even Mercer probably doesn't know anymore. Somewhere out there, Daniel Mercer was free, but he wasn't running. He had started something planned quietly for years. As Jennings left the prison, the sky was completely dark. Her phone vibrated. Another location. Another victim. Phase 3. This wasn't a prison break. It was the beginning of something far bigger. And somewhere out there, Daniel Mercer was watching it unfold. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what comes next. Hit subscribe, because the next case might be even darker.